welcome everybody attending on behalf of Plastic Bank to our webinar. Peter, this has to be about our fifth or sixth webinar. And today we're going to be talking about what future are we creating? Systems change versus status quo, hope versus despair. And so today we are blessed to have Peter joining us, who is the coordinator of Plastic Bank's Faith program, as we tackle this issue of the future of plastic, how we are to confront some of the environmental challenges that we're facing. We'll be discussing these points from both a scientific standpoint, sharing with you facts, sharing with you concerns from the scientific world, but we'll also be placing all of this within a spiritual perspective. As people of faith, how are we to respond? What are our responsibilities? And in what ways do we need to maybe rethink how the human person is within creation? So we're going to talk a little bit about these issues. And the agenda, the main discussion is really focused on, what are we confronting in the next 20 years? What role does spirituality play in bringing us into the current situation, and how do we need to leverage spirituality and the insights from a faith perspective to really reform our minds first and our actions second, to really bring about the change that's needed to really be better stewards of creation and the environment. And so Peter will also be speaking to us about what the future of plastic looks like and how Plastic Bank is really an innovator in this space. And then we'll also be discussing some of the radical systems changes needed in order to accomplish this mission, and how faith communities can really be important brokers of hope in a time of a crisis, in a time of uncertainty, and really in a time in which the human person finds themselves anxious and concerned about the future. So with that's our plan, that's our agenda for the next hour or so. I'd like to let Peter, I'd like to let you introduce yourself to our audience, maybe share a little bit about who you are, your role in Plastic Bank, and then I'll follow it up by doing the same.
All right. Hello, everybody. It's so wonderful you are here with us today. I'm Peter Nitschke. I'm the Faith program specialist of the Plastic Bank. Plastic Bank will explain later more about it, but we are engaging faith communities to become plastic neutral. I am German, but I lived half of my life in the Philippines as a development worker, spending most of my time in the slums of Manila and doing grassroots projects and also doing academic studies and teaching. And then in 2017, I started the branch of the Plastic Bank of the Philippines, and that is now running, and a very successful branch now running with local leadership. And since 2018, I'm back in Germany and started the Faith program. I'm married with Fe, wonderful Filipino wife, and I have 2 grown-up children, 24, getting married next year. My first, so I'll become a father-in-law, maybe a grandfather soon, and then have a 20-year-old son. That's about me.
Wonderful, Peter. And I didn't get a chance to introduce myself fully. My name is Ryan Thomas. I work with Peter very closely as a strategic advisor, especially when it comes to the relationship that Plastic Bank has developed with the Vatican and with the Catholic Church around the world. My background, I spent roughly 8 years in news and media, most recently as the Director of News Operations for EWTN News and Catholic News Agency. I spent not quite as long as Peter abroad, but probably 7 of the last 10 years abroad, splitting my time in Peru, Chile, and in Italy. Currently advising Plastic Bank and helping Plastic Bank in its reflection and expansion, as one of our goals is to really enliven faith communities around the world to become better stewards of our resources and our environment. So without any additional delay, we'll jump into the agenda. And again, thank you for all of you for joining us on this webinar. A practical point here before we get started. If this is your first time using GoToWebinar, let me just walk you through. There is a panel on the right-hand side that shows you a couple of things there. It shows you where you can write questions, and you can send us your questions at any point during the webinar. Also, there's a chat function there if you want to send us a message. But feel free to ask us questions during the webinar. And towards the end, what I'll do is engage Peter on those questions. So the questions that we don't get to, we will try to follow up with an email. And like I said, at any point during the webinar, as a question occurs to you, or a point or a comment, feel free to send those in there. Great. So our first topic here, Peter, is why is it important to talk about the future? This is something that, you know, in a time, 2020 has been one of those, I would say, pivotal years, a year of axis in which so much change has happened. So many people, so many of my colleagues, so many of my friends have made the comment recently that they feel as though they can't plan for the future because there's so much uncertainty. I think this is a temptation that we have to really confront. If we are not willing to plan for the future, we essentially are living we're living almost paralyzed. We're by the fear, by the uncertainty. Planning for the future is so crucial because it does give us hope. It does plant a path forward that allows us to build, allows us to grow. And so on a very practical level, planning for the future is crucial. And during this time we have together, you'll find me quoting both Pope Francis's teaching encyclical, Laudato Si, which came out a little over 5 years ago, and also the second most cited person in that document, a man by the name of Romano Guardini. He was a philosopher and Catholic priest who spent a lot of time reflecting and writing about the future. And so I want to share with you all just a couple of important points that he's made, especially about the future. And he says in his book, The End of the Modern World, he says, the human person faces the same question of, quote, place. Where is the place of the human person? The question seeks answer not merely as to the place where the human person shares in nature with all corporal beings, but answers above all is the existential place. Where is the human person's place in being? And I think that this is a really important idea. When we think about the past, when we think about the present, when we think about the future, when we think about ourselves, we do so oftentimes in a subjective way. It's about I, it's about me, and we lose a little bit the objective approach. Objectively, where is the human person within creation? And I think that there are some really important things when we talk about planning for the future. Do we want a future in which we are more interconnected, and a future in which we are better stewards, a future in which we live in increased peace and harmony? Do we want a future in which we are more united with creation, in which we recognize and allow creation to speak to us, and in the way in which we care for creation, does that experience make us more human? So these are a couple of crucial, I would say, elements in our reflection of why is it important to really reflect on the future. And Guardini really traces this idea of the evolution of human nature focused on and God and the way in which God has ordered creation. Um, he speaks about how disorder enters into the heart of the human person when sin enters the world. By rejecting God's plan of love, sin creates chaos, creates disorder. All of a sudden, the clarity of humankind's responsibility to love, to serve, to care for oneself and creation is disordered. And this is the state in which we live now. So when we talk about the future, we should have the ideal of, and scripture really gives us the proper principles or elements to be guided by. Do we want to be proper caretakers of creation? Do we want to, in the way in which we are perfecting creation, open ourselves up to that perfection? And I think when we talk about the future, we have to think about that ideal state. We have to embrace it, because not only is it something that will create the peace and the harmony that we're looking for, but it's a process by which we are perfected. So those are a few of my thoughts, Peter, on why we need to think about the future, and what role does the ideal state play in us planning for the future. So I want to give you the opportunity to speak a little bit about how Plastic Bank is working to create a future that is working towards that peace, that harmony, that's creating ecosystems that nurture each other.
Well, you said this wonderfully, Ryan, and thank you so much. It's really very inspiring. And I think when you talk about chaos, we can see a plastic is unfortunately the perfect example of how chaos has run through our economy, our life. That the mismanaged plastic is creating a disaster in our oceans, and they found already microplastic in our organs, and about 10 million tons of plastic go into the ocean every year. And once they're there, they stay there, and they are accumulating there. It's getting more and more. And Plastic Bank wants really to do something about it. And our vision is a future where no more plastic becomes waste. Because if you look at God's economy, there is no waste. Everything is being regenerated. And so we need to reduce the way we use plastic, but we need to regenerate the plastic. That's already there. And so we want to revolutionize the economic system in a way that unites humanity. And also plastic collection is now where the poor are being disadvantaged. The informal sector, which collects about 27% of all the plastic, they're only being paid peanuts, and we are empowering them to get the fair share and to get to a life out of poverty. And so we are an economic development company that humanizes all the shareholders. So bringing us to our humanity, well, like you ask, who is the human? And I think the human should live in dignity. The human is God's God's image, right? And so it has been distorted, and we want to bring that back, and by humanizing, giving people a way out of dehumanizing poverty. And we have 4 core values which are so important to us, and I think those are interestingly core values of a business, but they could be core values of a church or any kind of organization that values human being, that values earth. And we want to gather together, what he said, uniting humanity, gathering not only the plastic together, but gathering humanity together to create a better future and to reveal the value of each human being, but also the value of the plastic as something that's too precious to become waste. So our vision is a circular economy where plastic is being reused and reused again. And this is based on acting on the service of love. We feel that love is the basis of all human interaction if we want to create a future, because what brought us into this situation is greed and egoism, self-centeredness, and love is the antidote. It's the opposite of it. And it also is a future where people grow. So our next core value is, or the last one, is the becoming, that we are becoming the people the planet needs, the people that humanity needs. We are obviously not there yet, but it should be our utmost goal to become these people, to do everything that is in our ability to transform ourselves, and through that inner transformation, also our environment is being transformed and regenerated. So this is the future that Plastic Bank is aspiring to, and I think it's very much in line what you said. It has a spiritual grounding, so to say, and whether we get there or not, there are a number of factors that are influencing that. And Ryan, you have done some thoughts into what factors are influencing the next 20 years, probably positive or negative ones. And I think it would be powerful if you could share what factors you have seen as the most important ones.
Thank you, Peter. And when we talk about the next 20 years, it's important for us to understand and to do a critical analysis of the last 20 years and the evolution of not only looking at the world as a sum of our actions, but more importantly, going to the root and understanding that actions come from beings, human beings. So, what is prompting our actions? What is driving these actions? And so, again, going back to Laudato Si, going back to Romano Guardini's The End of the Modern World, I put together a couple of reflections here. And in Laudato Si number 18 and 19, I want to read to you a reflection that Pope Francis has developed here. And it starts, the continued acceleration of changes affecting humanity and the planet is coupled today with a more intensified pace of life and work, which might be called rapidification. Although change is part of the working of complex systems, the speed with which human activity has developed contrasts with the naturally slow pace of biological evolution. Moreover, the goals of this rapid and constant change are not necessarily geared to the common good or to integral and sustainable human development. Change is something desirable, yet it becomes a source of anxiety when it causes harm to the world and to the quality of life of much of humanity. Following a period of irrational confidence in progress in human abilities, some sectors of society are now adopting a more critical approach. We see increasing sensitivity to the environment and the need to protect nature, along with a growing concern, both genuine and distressing, for what is happening to our planet. Let us review, however, curiously, those questions which are troubling us today and which we can no longer sweep under the carpet. Our goal is not to amass information or to satisfy curiosity, but rather to become painfully aware, to dare to turn what is happening to the world into our own personal suffering, and thus to discover what each of us can do about it. End quote there. And again, that's from Laudato Si number 18 and 19. So I think our point of departure here is to recognize, if we want to change the exterior over the next 20 years, our exterior actions come from within each one of us. And so if I, Ryan, want to change the way in which I'm interacting, both on a human level and also on a level of human to the rest of creation, I need to do interior work, right? So that's an important point. It's not just about an exterior movement without the interior, right? So we need to elevate, we need to recognize the value of creation. We need to recognize that we have been given the gift of what Pope Francis calls our common home. And when we begin to see that we are actors within a common home, and he uses common home because it's our shared space. And it's important when we think about the next 20 years, not to think so in the abstract, because the abstract can lead us to a nihilistic approach. What we really need to do, and we'll speak about systems and global systems, but it's just so crucial to accent here the importance of coherence in the personal life, coherence living locally and affecting, creating communities around us with our schools, our churches, our cities, and our small communities, systems, ways of living in which we have more coherence. So, as an opening to that, a couple of things that we need to be aware of over the next 20 years that are going to be important factors is, again, having a critical view of where we've come from, how we're living today, and how that continued status quo is going to lead us down a very dangerous path. The problem today of ocean plastic was created essentially in a lifetime. It was created essentially over the last less than 100 years. And we believe, and we have reason to believe, that it can also be solved within a generation or sooner. And Peter, during this webinar, I hope that you'll speak a little bit more about Plastic Bank's approach to plastic and social plastic, and how we are helping to reshape our relationship with plastic. And I use the word relationship because it's not just an abstract thing, it's something that we come into contact with. In addition, another important factor to consider when projecting us over the next 20 years is that essentially, if we continue on the trajectory that we're in right now, which maybe we should say is, instead of status quo, maybe it's just business as usual, annual flows of plastic into the ocean could potentially triple in the next 20 years. And now that's very daunting, because that will put the amount of plastic into the ocean that has a greater weight than all of the fish in the oceans of the world. Now, if that's not an analogy that strikes you, that terrifies you, I don't know what is, but that is the trajectory that we're on. What's more is that even if all current major industry and government commitments are met, the world would see a reduction in annual rates of plastic flowing into the ocean of only 7% from the business as usual scenario. So what conclusion can we draw from this is that the way that we are living is totally unsustainable. If we flood our oceans with plastics that eventually break down into microplastics, which find its way increasingly into our food supply, we will be infected with plastic in our bodies. And what result will that have not only on the human person, but on the global ecosystem? How important are our oceans to the survival of this planet? Our oceans cover 70% of the planet. They provide so much stability into our ecosystems. So this is where we're going in the next 20 years. Without action, the annual flow of plastic into the ocean will nearly triple in the next 20 years to 29 million metric tons per year. Now, that's really difficult I don't have a vision in my head of what a metric ton is, but think about this idea in the next 20 years that there'll be more weight of plastic than fish. It's daunting. Governments and industry leaders are stepping up with new policies, right? And some countries, like in Germany, have been much more proactive than others. And there's a lot of voluntary initiatives. At Plastic Bank, we're working with a number of corporations that have taken not only steps of making gestures, but have made incredible sacrifices to change their relationship with plastic and to seed very important initiatives, including some by Plastic Bank, to first prevent the flow of plastic into the ocean and also change our relationship with plastic. Now, I also want to make an important point, underline, bold, highlight that there is not a single solution to end ocean plastic pollution. I think that there are a lot of really good initiatives out there. And what Plastic Bank and Peter, I'll let you speak into this in a moment here, is we're turning the tap off, so to speak, of the flow of plastic into the ocean. The benefit of this is that it's so much more efficient and economical to prevent the flow of plastic into the ocean than it is to attempt to clean it up after it's entered into the ocean. As Peter mentioned, as time goes by, the plastic does break down into microplastics and are extremely difficult to be able to cleanse the ocean once it's broken down. And so we do need both the upstream and the downstream solutions, which involve partnering with major multinationals, with governments on the local level, and Plastic Bank plays a role in all of that. And we also need to be pulling plastic out of the ocean. So these are some of the things, Peter, that I think over the next 20 years is important to highlight when we speak about ocean plastic. I don't know what thoughts you have about additional ones.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. And I think this is really, when you talk about the future of plastic, it is like our title says, hope or despair. What future are we creating? And if we continue like this, it is really a future of despair. Yeah, like what you said, is current plastic production is now about 18 million tons a year, and by 2040 it will be 450 million tons a year. So that would be like about 4,000 Empire State Buildings made out of plastic that we are producing right now. And another analogy for the plastic that you said is going into the ocean, they're saying it would be putting a 50-kilo plastic bag, and that's a big bag. If you would think like that is already a super sack, putting along the coastline of the whole Earth. Now, our coastline is 1.2 million kilometers. So that is a distance to the moon and to the moon for 3 times. Now, let's put 350-kilo plastic bags next to each other and then staple them up until the moon. That is the plastic that will go into the sea in 1 year. Can you imagine that? It is unbelievable. So that is the future of plastic. And like what you said, going back to the past, 1967, Lynn White, a historian, he brought out a document which is called the historical roots of the ecological crisis. And what he's basically saying is that this is actually the fault of Christianity, because in Genesis it says God said to the human being to rule the earth. And I want to go back to what you said about changing from the inside. And I think that White totally misunderstood that ruling the earth means or not dominating in a way to exploit, in a way to just see creation as a commodity. And I think that Christianity actually has not been vocal enough, and it's only in the last 30 years that really the World Day of Prayer for Creation started, where Christianity really started to take care of creation. Of course, Francis of Assisi in the medieval times was an outlier, but they were generally Christianity has not really held against this commodity view of creation. And I think especially modernity and the industrial age has really maximized it, and that brought us into where we are now. And I think what the Pope is in Laudato Si is calling us to ecological conversion, and I think that is what we really have to do to go back to the roots that God was calling us to care for creation, to tend the garden, to be as good stewards, and to love in harmony. That's this whole call of integral ecology, which is justice and peace of humanity and creation, that is also shown in the Hebrew word shalom, actually, that we are living in shalom. And so what would be a shalom for plastic? That would be, is there a possible shalom for plastic? And the research that you showed about from Pew Institute and Systemic says that actually we can reduce, with some significant investments, with political will, we could reduce the flow of ocean plastic by 80%. And that would be to reduce plastic. We could reduce it by 30% through eliminating plastic, reusing plastic, new deliverable models. We could substitute plastic, that would be 17%, through paper, coated paper, compostables. We could recycle about 20% through mechanical recycling, to chemical recycling. We convert it into energy, and we can stop the mismanaged plastic. So that would be some significant reduction. So we could go down significantly if we wanted to, if we are willing to put the investments in, if you're willing to make the decisions. And it would need So there is no single one solution, and it would need governments, it would need the civil society, it would need the private sector, and it also needs the faith community. And I think the faith community has an important thing, important voice, because the drivers for change are first people worrying about for the children. And I think that is something where faith is very strong about. Another thing for transformation is also it has to come through a trusted source. And in many places in the world, religious leaders are a trusted source. So if religious leaders speak out, that can be something that that could be done to radically change the system based on a new kind of worldview, of an integral worldview that we have to develop, and we have
Peter,
to develop it.
yeah, if I
Yeah,
could jump in here just to complement a few things that you're saying, and to going back again, to Guardini's reflection, you brought up St. Francis of Assisi and this medieval Middle Age period. Um, that, up until that point, especially in Christianity, um, man had the human person had seen themselves in an objective sense, in a way in which they saw that the human person was a being within the order of nature, was a creature of God and a steward of his will. What happens in the Middle Ages is a shift in the human person's thinking. And it's a shift that is actually pretty reminiscent of what happens during the fall, and the entering of sin, is that this late medieval man, what we might call the proto-modern man, almost falls in love with himself. Is this experience of the, staring at his or her reflection and falling in love with the description of the human person, now unbound from the chains of responsibility. And there's a new type of thinking that occurs around this time where, again, instead of seeing the human the human person objectively, now it's a subjective experience where everyone chooses their own meaning, their own purpose, their own truth. And so what happens then is disorder, an unbound responsibility to one another, to creation, and a view that is not about stewardship, is not about perfection in a common good way, but it's about me. It's about me, myself, and I, about my pleasures, about my own truths, about my own desires and seeking of pleasure. And so I think that, when we talk about how spirituality needs to be an important role of bringing us out of this current situation in the next 20 years, we really need to rediscover who we are objectively, not just my own truth, my own this, my own that. Um, we need to see ourselves in the greater order of things, and
yeah,
this is an interior process too, Peter, that I think, when we look at the other crises in the world, really has a root in this disorder.
yeah, yeah. I think another point that just came to my mind is, of course, when we started the origins of humanity, nature was some kind of hostile. There were big animals. The humanity had no tools and no mechanical things to rule over nature. They were subject to nature. Now there was no. If you think about it, the last 10,000 years of human being, humanity was not in a position to rule over nature or even to threaten the existence of creation. It's only actually that since World War II, basically, we have advanced so much that now actually we are not anymore endangered by nature. Well, we are now again, but we are endangered only because we endanger nature and because we have forgotten we are also nature. We belong to the same ecosystem and we are part of the ecosystem, and the ecosystems sustain us. And so like somebody said, we are now the first generation to leave the world to the next generation in a shape that endangers their well-being. You know, every other generation passed the world on in a better shape somehow. There were always improvements, but now we have improved so much that it becomes bad again, because we have, like what you said, we have lost that connection. We have lost this integrity because we have just started to focus on ourselves. And I think if you look about this radical system change, if we look at, we want to reduce ocean plastic by 80% in the next 20 years. How is it going to happen? And we see humanity can change. COVID is forcing us to change, and so it can happen because it has to. And I think we need a spirituality and a value system and a worldview that brings us to the point where we see we need to change. It's absolutely necessary to do this, and even to sacrifice, like what you said, we became so focused on enjoying life, but is it really helping us? Are we happier people? You see, we have all kinds of technical advancements, we have medical care, but are we happier than our ancestors 100 years ago, 500 years ago? Or are we not somehow emptier inside? And so are we not hopeless inside? If you look at suicide rates and all these kind of things, and drug addiction, is that not a symbol of the chaos, of the emptiness, of the loss of roots? And so that would be the questions now. How can we as people of faith become brokers of hope that nourish this internal change, that will empower us or drive us also to make that systemic change externally?
Yeah, I agree with that, Peter. And when we talk about here, the spirituality that needs to lead us out of this current situation, it really, once we look at ourselves, once we do an analysis of the human person, then the next question is, what kind of radical changes do we need to make? And the first one, of course, is within ourselves. We have ruptures that we need to heal first, and then it's the ruptures with our brothers and sisters, and the ruptures with creation, and systems. It's interesting when you look at public policy. All systems are created by the human person, and systems are really just a projection of what's inside of us. So that's why, we're not just talking about systems in an abstract. We're talking about what's going on in ourselves here, and an analysis of ourselves. Guardini talks about the transition from the modern man to the technological man, and from the technological man to the mass man. And I want to make a couple of points here, Peter, and then I'd love your insights here to propose some concrete systems maybe that we're implementing within Plastic Bank and have been for some time. But the technological mind sees nature as an incessant order, as a cold body of facts, as a mere given, if you will, as an object of utility, as raw material to be hammered into a useful shape. It views the cosmos similarly as a mere space into which objects can be thrown with complete indifference. The technological man or human person wants to remold the world. But again, remember, we've got this subjective view. So it's remolding the world chaotically according to individuals' personal truths, personal, subjective ideas. And Guardini talks about the movement from the technological man to what he calls the mass man, the mass human person. And this movement is interesting because technological advancement is not it does not just happen in the abstract. It has consequences. And so this transition into the mass man, the mass human person, is that the human person today is absorbed by technology in rational abstraction. This is why I keep bringing up this idea of abstraction. The mass human person is the logical progression from this technological takeover. And so what are some keys that Guardini notes? He says that the mass human person has entered history with no traditions of his own. In fact, it must assert itself against those traditions, which until now have still been present in our culture. The mass human being has no desire for independence or originality in either the management of the conduct of their life, nor does it seek to create an environment belonging only to itself, because what they want is to reflect only. It's about, again, this subjective experience. The technological distractions and abstractions force them to be in the patterns of machine production. They accept, quite simply, they are forms of life itself. There's no desire to live this life according to principles, except for the subjective. Neither liberty nor external action nor freedom of internal judgment seem for them to have any unique value. And they will unite themselves with any organization or movement or cause modeled after the mass itself. And so it's not, and I bring these points up, Peter, because it's not enough to join to a movement, because what we're seeing with this generation is a physical movement from one movement to the other, whatever is the most attractive in the moment. And when we talk about building systems or lifestyles, we really need to be talking about consistency, continuity, coherence. So these are the things that actually go against how we've been formed. Tradition and this coherence and this lifestyle goes against many of the values of today. And so if we're going to implement lasting, significant change, there has to be a renovation, a renewal of our mind and our approach. So
Yeah.
those are some principal points that I wanted to make on this, Peter, and give you the opportunity to speak concretely into what some of those systems could look like.
Okay. I think it is important to see that also there's always a movement against, like
Yes.
what you said. I think there people really techno savvy and some way becoming thrown back and forth in different directions, and we can see that. But there's also a strong move for people to find meaning in life, not just what you said, just not just being consumers of goods and some way, the current economy has degraded us in being consumers of goods and not anymore people who are shaping our future. It is the marketing that is shaping our future, so to say, and we have given our free will away. And I think there is a movement to get it back. And I think that when coming back to Plastic Bank, and especially going to the Plastic Bank program, what Plastic Bank is doing basically is a business in some way. We are recycling plastic, but it is plastic that otherwise would have gone to the ocean. It is plastic that is empowering informal collectors, and it is plastic that gives products a new meaning. So people, when they buy that product, they are supporting change, and I think that is a different approach. Like what you said, you just consume something for self-gratification, but here you can combine consume with doing something meaningful. And what we're doing with the FACE program, we are empowering FACE communities to do something about plastic. And I think what is often also the problem is that people feel helpless. You know, you see all those environmental problems, we talk about it, and you feel, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. You know, I feel helpless, I feel overwhelmed, you know. And but the faith program is something where people can concretely, congregations can concretely do something to collect the plastic in their communities, to collect the plastic of their members, to reduce their plastic footprint, to become aware, to break out of this kind of meaningless kind of thing, doing something concrete about it in their lives. And we have so much positive feedback through from faith communities, because Laudato Si is a wonderful document and people read it and then they say, well, it's wonderful, but now I'm going to do this. I'm going to apply this. What can I do now to make this reality? How can I put hand and feet to integral ecology in my own life, you know? And this is where Plastic Bank Facebook comes in, where churches can organize themselves. And we are now starting with 40 parishes in Rio de Janeiro to do this, to establish plastic-free churches in Rio. And we are also working now in the Philippines, and we're also starting with other religions as well. And I think that is something where people say, oh, it's not only just about the plastic, but it's about this feeling, I'm not a helpless victim of this situation. I'm a subject. I can do something. I have skills and I can change something, even if it's just something small. But you know, if what we're talking about is by 2040, if status quo continues, 4 billion people will not have access to waste management. That's probably almost more than 1/3 of the population, you know. But in some way, that is where faith communities can bring hope, where we can say, okay, if we bring millions of people together to do something small, it sums up to be something big, and it creates a system that changes the whole thing, you know. And I think that's very, very powerful, and that is where that makes me actually wake up every morning and do my job here at Plastic Bank.
Now, Peter, I agree with you. It is inspiring, and we're seeing people around the world rise up. I don't have the ability on my end to see the questions. I don't know if you're seeing any come through, but I want to encourage our audience to send us any questions that they might have of the topics that we've covered now that we're coming to the end of our hour together.
Okay, I have two comments from Robert Sluka, and what he's saying here is Great point, Ryan. We need an internal paradigm shift. Laudato Si is a big part of that for me. And then he said another one. You mentioned the important link between ocean health and human health. This is an area that people need to understand. Within a Christian faith context, we have to understand that science points out how we are not loving our neighbor. And I think that's a very good point, Robert. Ryan, you want to react to that, or?
Yeah, I do. I think that Robert, it's good to have you connected. Robert has attended a couple of our webinars before. He's a friend of Plastic Bank. You know, it's interesting to even see movies, Peter, sci-fi movies. I think of you know, the movie that came out, The Martian. I think of the movie that came out a couple of years ago. The name is escaping me right now, but these movies that look into the future, where you know, in many cases faith is not present, and there is so much hope placed in just science. And in this particular movie, they go off into space, exploring, and one of the main actors is is making the comment, you know, how great it will be leaving Earth behind, starting all over again without the baggage, right, of the transgressions and the suffering and the evil that has happened on Earth. And what they discover is that the issue is in the human heart, and they take this with them wherever they go. And so we have to remember that, yes, we do need good systems. Yes, we do need policy changes. Yes, we need all of these things. But it's the human heart that is ultimately going to project itself into these systems.
That, I think that is a very very important point. But I also think that that this is, we really need to find a way, in that way, to make science our ally, you know. And I think what we're now seeing is that that we have evidence that if you're not changing, we are going to hit the wall, and that is a result of our greed or our ecocentrism, you know. And so science is holding us somehow the mirror in the face, saying this is where your unchanged heart is getting you to, you know. And so I think it's just that so I think that needs to work together. And I thought, like, that research paper from Pew Institute that both of us used today, I think it really helped me. When I read that, I was crying. I was saying, man, we must do this, you know. We must do this system change in the way we use plastic. I don't want to stand with my grandchildren at a beach and there is no more sand, it's only plastic waste, you know, and you go into the water and there's only plastic waste. And there's places where it is like that already, you know. And if you, when we were in Bali, they were just every morning there was a truck just cleaning the beach, you know. And if they would not clean the beach for a week, all the tourists would be gone, basically, you know. So
Yeah, and Peter, if I could jump in there, I think you're making a really crucial point, and I want to clarify too on my end that this is not an excuse not to act now. It's not an issue of let me like focus 100% on my interior and my life, and then when I'm perfect, then I'll start implementing systematic change. It's a both and, right? The crisis that we're living in is so grave that we have to respond now. And it has to be both an exterior and interior. And the way in which we are coherent in our exterior with actions that are good and integral it affects our interior. So St. Augustine, early 4th century Christian, spoke about how it's a both and approach. And I think, to your point, we need that right now.
Well, good. That was a very good way to close the webinar, I would say. We are now 1 hour, and then I see there are no more questions. Anyway, you can still email us, and you can also check us our website. You can check out the FACE program there at plasticbank.com. You will get an email tomorrow with a link to our website, and you can check it out. And we hope you will become and maybe you are already, and we hope you got encouraged to and filled with hope that there's something we can do, there's something you can do, and let's not wait, let's do it. The ocean cannot wait. That's what our founder David Katz always said, and I think creation cannot wait either. And so thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you, Peter. God bless, and we look forward to if there's interest in bringing Plastic Bank and the Faith program to your churches, to your temples, to your mosques, whatever faith tradition you might be, please feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to collaborate and help introduce you to the fullness of the Plastic Bank Faith program. And we will also be following up as webinars become more available in the future, as we enter in a couple of weeks here into the season of creation. So keep your eyes open, and we hope to have you join us here in the near future. So we hope you have a great evening, a great morning, great afternoon, great evening, and until next time, God bless everyone.
Yes, God bless you, and until next time, thank you, Ryan, also for you, and have still a good trip back from New York.
Bye-bye now.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye.